Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to call this Committee on MDC Government Special Meeting, Monday, September 30th, 2024. My name is John Bozano, and I'll be chairing the committee. Is there anyone here from the public that wishes to make some comments relative to agenda items? Yes. Well.
Good afternoon. My name is Elizabeth Bryden, and I am MDC customer and homeowner in West Hartford. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to comment today on agenda item number 5 regarding retroactive reimbursement for customer sewer repairs. As many of you know, I have attended numerous MDC committee meetings for about a year and a half now, and I have followed the MDC process, including using an MDC recommended contractor and following permitting and inspection requirements in an attempt to resolve an issue at my home regarding a sewer lateral repair in January 2023. To briefly recap the issue, I had a sewage backup into my home, and I had to pay over $12,000 to replace a sewer pipe in the woods on someone else's property to which I had no access. In my case, the sewer lateral comes out the back of my house, down a hill, off my property, behind my neighbor's house, into the woods on someone else's property, and that's where a portion needed to be replaced. At the July 10th, 2024 Committee on MDC Government meeting, which I attended, the committee voted to develop a draft ordinance for consideration that would allow the Sewer House Connection Program to provide retroactive reimbursement for replacement and/or partial repairs to sewer laterals for some time period to be determined prior to the implementation of the program on July 12, 2023. I really appreciate the committee discussing the potential new ordinance today that would address situations like mine, as this issue has been passed from committee to committee for a long time now. In terms of retroactive reimbursement, I would like to note that the Hartford Sewerage System Repair Fund does allow homeowners who have been impacted by damage on or after January 1st, 2021 to apply for reimbursement, so there is a precedent for retroactive reimbursement. In addition, I am advocating for the Sewer House Connection Program to allow for partial replacement of sewer laterals and not just full replacements if a partial replacement solves the problem as it did in my case. To summarize, I respectfully request that the committee approve this new ordinance with a reasonable time period for retroactive reimbursements, given that there is a precedent for the MDC paying for repairs to homeowner laterals, as well as a precedent for retroactive reimbursement for homeowners affected by sewer issues. I believe the approval of this ordinance will allow homeowners affected by costly sewer lateral replacement and/or repairs to seek fair reimbursement. And again, I appreciate the opportunity to share my thoughts again today and hope you take them into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else here that would wish us to make some public comments relating to the items on the agenda? Okay, hearing none, we will move on to item number 3, which is the approval of the meeting minutes of July 10th, 2024. Do I have a motion?
So moved. Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion on the item? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Abstentions?
Abstain.
That was an abstention.
Commissioner Buell, was that an abstention or an aye?
Yes, I wasn't at that meeting,
Okay.
yes.
Okay, motion carries. Move to item number 4, which is the consideration and potential action regarding a new bylaw, B6J, regarding training. I'll open it up for discussion. Mr. Chairman, would you like to start
Thank
the
you, Mr.
discussion?
Chairman. Commissioner Curry. I had proposed that to the chairman of the committee that it be added to the agenda. I'll preface by saying that when working for the state of Connecticut, I was the workplace violence coordinator for the Department of Correction. So I'm very familiar with workplace violence and what constitutes workplace violence and the outcomes that can happen from actual workplace violence, both with the victim and the perpetrator. So I had proposed this to the chairman to be added to the agenda. If you can recall, more than a few months ago, maybe upwards of a year ago, we had some shall we just say, unfriendly conversations between commissioners. And then not soon after that, we had some less than friendly conversations between commissioners and MDC employees. I didn't want to react at that time, just to add fuel to the fire, but there's been a reasonable amount of time passed and calmness has prevailed to most. So I brought this forward thinking that it would be a good idea, at the very least, that the commissioners be aware of what constitutes workplace violence and whistleblower issues. Most of us, whether we work for the state or other employees, we've probably had workplace violence training in the past. But it certainly would, I think, benefit us all to continue this on, and I haven't recommended or picked a date, but every 2 years, 3 years. And of course, new members coming on would get it when they take their seat at this table. The idea was that our employees, all our employees from Scott down, get workplace violence training. And I believe we should hold ourselves to a higher standard. I think for the most part, we do hold ourselves to a higher standard. And I think it would behoove us so that we all understand, each of us understands what workplace violence is and what the ramifications can be should it happen in the workplace. So with that, Mr. Chair, I would like to ask Jamie to come forward and make a brief presentation on what workplace violence training might look like.
Good evening, Commissioners. Chairperson Curry did ask that I provide a little bit information in regards to what we provide in terms of training for staff. We do extensive training with staff. A large portion of that is also safety training for the various departments, which does vary from department to department. But specific to the conversation tonight, HR and environmental health and safety and patrol are all involved in various trainings. We do new hire orientation for every employee, and part of that is an active shooter training. We also do a workplace violence training, and then we do the state mandated sexual harassment and prevention training, which really covers more than just sexual harassment. It covers harassment in general. So those are the three primary trainings that we do for new hires. We also do run the active shooter, workplace violence, and the sexual harassment periodically. Sexual harassment, for example, they only require that we do that once every 10 years, which seems way too far. So we do that every 2 to 3 years, but we are constantly looking at, what's a best practice in terms of those trainings. We also do with Rita in person, and I'm sorry, those trainings that I just talked about are all done through our online system, which is Percipio or Skillsoft. So that's the vast majority of how our trainings are delivered to staff, just because it seems to work for the departments better than having to pull them off in a classroom setting. The whistleblower, on the other hand, we do classroom settings, and those are done multiple times a year. And the goal with the whistleblower training is to make sure we are capturing new hires on a regular basis. And then again, we're offering that to all employees every few years as well. I don't know if you have any further questions or if you're looking for any more specific information, but in addition to those formal trainings that we offer, either online or in person, we also do address the formal policies associated with some of these things in our employee handbook, as well as some of this in our affirmative action plan as well.
Yeah. In addition, Jamie, so in discussions with the chairman, what we would propose would be to provide a similar training that we provide our own staff, but would be an independent trainer. Would not be Jamie or Rita providing that training. It would be someone that would be independent outside the MDC staff to provide that training for the board.
Okay, thank you, Jamie.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Jamie. Any other?
Chairman?
Yes.
And as we discussed prior to this meeting, Mr. Chairman, that If you read the language, it's kind of silent on where the first line, Commissioner says, may shall be required to complete annual training in person, combination thereof, which subject to the modification of the expansion by the district chair. That's, you can be interpreted to say the district chair has the authority, if you will, to determine whether the training is going to be internal or from an outside source. And if no one is comfortable with that language, then I would suggest that after the thereof, that provided by district staff or outside counsel be added. But if you're okay with the way it's written,
I'm fine with that, Mr. Chairman. I'm okay with it. That works for me.
okay. All right.
Chairman, any other questions?
No, I'm good.
Any other questions from the?
Oh, I guess I have one.
Oh.
Would be for Scott,
Oh,
who's walking away. I know we're having our first meeting with the towns tomorrow.
Yes.
But I'm going to ask then if the board refers this on to the district board, or the committee, that you're going to have to find some dollars for, and not necessarily specific to this, but maybe a small lump sum of dollars for commissioner training.
Yes, we will do that.
Okay.
Yes, Commissioner Holloway.
Yeah, could you repeat what you just said about the training? About in-house or, yeah, go over that piece again.
Well, the way that it was written is written.
Yeah,
It says subject to modification or expansion by the district chair, which the legal department interprets as would give the district chair the authority to say in-house is going to do it, or we can go outside and do it. And I was offering, if you weren't comfortable with that language, before the, right after the combination thereof, we could put provided by district staff or by outside training. But they're telling me the way it's written now would allow that to be at the call of the district chair.
You would have that discretion, Mr. Chair.
Right.
That's fine.
oh, okay, you make that decision.
Yes.
Okay, I'm cool, thank you.
Commissioner Holloway, you good?
I'm good, thank you.
Commissioner Hoffman?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Not a member of the committee, but I do have a question. Do I understand from the information provided by Jamie and Commissioner Curry's comments that any staff member, obviously present at some discussion that may have gotten out of hand, any commissioner, any citizen member, if they heard something that to them appears to be some sort of an infraction, do they have the right, and to whom do they lodge any complaint?
Well, I could answer that as far as employees go, and the complaint would be filed through the chain of command, whether it be affirmative action or human resources. For commissioners, we're opening a whole new area that I can't answer that. I'm not even sure that an outside civilian, if you will, could file a workplace violence. I've never heard of it done. They certainly could file a complaint, but it wouldn't necessarily be a workplace violence complaint. Jamie, do you have any comment on that?
Don't have any comment other than what you've already shared.
Yeah,
I can say the whistleblower complaint does seem to be written specific to staff. It doesn't extend to commissioners from our interpretation. On the workplace violence side, I would think anyone that has any fear of violence happening has an obligation to report it to whatever avenues they have access to, whether that be HR or to Scott or patrol. Yeah.
And if I may, Mr. Chair, just to add to that, the chairman mentioned this, but there is a gap in this discussion, this topic regarding workplace violence coming from a commissioner or to staff. There's really, it's not built into the whistleblower policy, and it's not clear as to who would go where. So hopefully part of this training would develop that guidance.
I believe our district council has a question or comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I may, Chris Stone, District Council. I would suggest that if it's a workplace violence complaint lodged by an employee against a commissioner, as rare as that may happen, that would go to which should go to Mr. Jellison. As to commissioner having an issue with another commissioner, I would suggest that would go to Chairman Curry. Doesn't provide that in the document itself. I can see that, but practically, that would be at least the first stop for those two types of complaints.
Thank you. I would only add, Mr. Chairman, that this is a standalone, separate entity just to establish training. Once that's established, then there will be other opportunities for the committee to look at, whether it be consolidating workplace violence and harassment policies into one, or rewriting and adding so that it also includes not just employees but commissioners. So there's other steps that I think are going to have to be taken at some point once we establish the training.
Any other questions regarding this issue? Good. All right, so I will entertain a motion to move this forward to the full body. Is there a motion?
So moved. Second.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
Aye.
Say it again? That was a yes? Any abstentions? All right, this motion passes and moves forward. Item number 5 is a discussion and potential action regarding potential ordinance for retroactive reimbursement of customer sewer repairs. I'll open it up to questions. Scott, you're dying to say something.
Default, right? So I know this has gone to this topic, and I think Mrs. Bryden, is that how you say it, has come before us a couple of times at DPW. We've kicked this around. We've provided dollars of what it would cost to go back. Bob Barron did things, estimated effective dates 6 months prior to up to 42 months. So we have those numbers. We presented those numbers to BPW. Moving forward, effective July 1, this is documents that was presented already to BPW, and I will make sure everybody gets a copy of it. But going forward, this was going to cost the MDC approximately a $460,000 average cost going forward. Going backwards, 6 months would add, and these, again, this is assuming that we're going backwards, but we're only going backwards for laterals that were replaced through a permit process at utility services. So in other words, we verified, we inspected, we oversaw the repair, and it's full replacement as well. That's the caveat, these numbers. So that is 310, and this is going back looking at actual permits that were approved back 6 months. You double it if you go back a year, 900,000 if you go back 18 months, 1,065,000 go back 2 years, 1.2 all the way up to 1.5, extending it 42 months. So those are the numbers. The challenge for BPW and for this committee is how, if the decision was to you know, what we've said is if you replace your lateral, we'll give you up to $10,000. So that's the assumption is you're replacing your lateral. Now, in this circumstance, obviously the lateral would be much more expensive to replace the whole thing. But the homeowner has said, I've spent up to $10,000. So the question becomes, do you modify the ordinance to allow a homeowner to get up to $10,000 even though they haven't replaced the entire lateral? And the goal of the program is to make sure that homeowners replace their entire lateral. But there are circumstances like this one, which is a very long lateral. I would, just to clarify on this long lateral, you know, these occur and they're everywhere. And at no fault to the MDC, right? These laterals were built and approved by the towns that they were built in. So, but this is a very common in some of our towns and in Hartford. So the numbers that we presented, again, were for replacing the entire lateral permitted by utility services. If we were to do the one concern we have, staff does, is that if we try to micromanage pieces and parts of the 10,000, you know, there's only a $3,000 repair or there's a $5,000. Now we have to keep track of this thing that becomes a big program. But, you know, to be fair, besides going backwards, to be fair, if a homeowner spends $10,000, spends $12,000 and only replaces half the lateral, should we not provide that homeowner with $10,000 like we would anybody else? Mm-hmm. So there's a fairness issue there. The question is, how far back do you want to go? That's the challenge. Is how far back do we go?
District Council Stone, you have a comment to make? Chris?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, you were on my computer audio before, now on AirPods or earbuds. So I hope it's a little better. I think just picking up on Scott's point, this is more than just a request to retroactively apply a reimbursement of some money for a repair. It's a change in the policy that was established in making passing the ordinance in the first instance, and that is the whole concept of a partial repair versus the full repair. And there were reasons why, and Scott laid them out, reasons why it was limited to a full repair as opposed to a partial. So just to understand what you're being asked is not only to retroactively apply a reimbursement, it's also to change the policy from from a full repair to a partial. And whether that's a significant change for purposes of the board or staff is certainly up to the board to consider. I would also point out, again, we've talked about this, how far back you go, you'll never pick up everybody unless you go back to arguably 1929, but you'll never pick up everyone who may have been done a repair in the past 2, 3, 4 years, unless you go back forever, and certainly no one's recommending that. The state program that was alluded to was a program, or the retroactivity program that the homeowner was referring to was a state program that was built into the statute when it was first promulgated, not after the fact. It was part of the program because of certain events that occurred that were uncontrollable by the property owner, i.e. significant rain events, significant storms that caused damage. Here, the homeowner had a responsibility to maintain the lateral. There's a document on the land records in West Hartford that sets out the responsibility for maintaining the lateral. This was permitted by the town of West Hartford back in 1980, plus or minus a year or so, but certainly before the MDC took over the system. And as part of that permission to construct and connect to what was then the Town of West Hartford system. The homeowner then, and it carries on to subsequent owners of the property, took on the responsibility for care and maintenance of that lateral. So just so I think to get a full picture, that was laid out in a document that, I don't know if Ms. Bryden is aware of that document, but it has been recorded on the land records, and we found that a few weeks ago. So that doesn't necessarily affect whether you want to go retroactive, but it does affect who's responsible for what out there at the site, whether it's on Ms. Bryden's property or on the neighbor's property through which her connection runs. So that is all I had to add, and if anyone has any questions, be more than happy to try to respond.
Thank you. Commissioner Avedisian?
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mr. Chairman, to Scott. I remember the conversation back, we were kind of hesitant when it comes to the partial repair. So if a partial repair is done, are we going to write in somewhere that if partial repair is done and we pay for it, if anything happens after that, it belongs to the homeowner? Because you're doing half of it, let's say the other half goes. I don't think, are we saying we're going to fix that also?
Yeah, so that's the problem, right? So once you open this door, this Pandora's box, then all of a sudden, so I'll give you a scenario. Remember, we're trying to micromanage workload, right? And we're trying to get out to a homeowner and we're trying to replace their lateral, and we're done for 50 years. We don't have to worry about that homeowner, right? So if we create a program that creates more work for us, that's what we're concerned about. So if you have a homeowner, I'm dealing with a home right now. Just got an email last night, and I've been dealing with it all day. And the lateral was placed in 2021. And the homeowner chose not to replace, under that program, with the old program, chose not to replace all of the lateral because it would have initially in 2017, because it would have, they would have had to replace and dig up the light pole, and they didn't want to do that because it was going to be more expensive. So then 2021, they have more problems, and now they got to redo the whole thing. So if we have $10,000 and a homeowner decides, I'm going to spend all of it, and that'll get me a new lateral, that's good. That meets the intent of the program. If they, because in this situation, you have a lateral, as Chris Stone rightly pointed out, was approved by the town of West Hartford, not the MDC, went cross-country because there was no sewer in the house, in the street in front of the house. Town approves the development, town approves the permit, town approves the house to be built, and allows this sewer lateral to be built through cross-country property. I'm sure there's easements for the sewer lateral, but the how much if you have to access 2 feet of pipe in a swamp, and it's going to cost you $10,000, that's the question. That's the question for the board. Is it, we come up with $10,000 based on a typical average cost for a linear foot of pipe to replace a lateral. It doesn't include those extremes, right? Mm-hmm. So if you have someone who needs $5,000 of the 10, now you've got to keep track. Well, that person has 5,000 left, and it might take 4 years or 5 years or 20 years for that homeowner to receive that additional 5,000. Are we going to put an escalator on that 5,000? Are you going to? Yeah, I mean, there's just so many things that you have to start thinking about on the point repair pieces, it really is written around a stereotypical lateral that's 20, 30 feet from the road, and it's going to be under the 10,000. I do think there could be language that would be fair. I don't know how to write it, but the concept of a homeowner getting 10,000, it should be for everybody, not just some that have a lateral that's less than, the $10,000 estimate. The question is, how do you write an ordinance that can narrow this to a program that doesn't become, a very difficult program to administer. That's the challenge.
Well, looking at this, I think a full replacement, I could vote for a full replacement. I think what you just said is gonna probably put a burden on the MDC and their staff. And I think we're pretty magnanimous just to do this, the full. And I think that might be the way to go. At least that's what I would like to say. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner,
I'm not a member of this committee, but basically, board's role is policy, and we are basically talking reactionary policy. State gave us the money, and then we became very generous with somebody else's money to give them money to do this, and that. And now it is being stretched in a variety of different scenarios, where even up to we did not have MDC install that pipe or have watched that pipe. So why are we doing this? Think through thoroughly, making the decision, even going retroactive, how far you want to go, and why do you have to go retroactive? It is somebody else's money. We all can sit here, yeah, do it, because it makes us look good.
any other questions? Mr. Chairman?
Thank you,
Sure,
Mr.
yes.
Chairman, Commissioner Curry. First, I guess I was shocked that the dollar value was so high. I had no idea that going back just a few months, there were so many laterals replaced. I'm not sure I see a burden. I look at it as a one and done in the process. If we were to come to some agreement on how far back and what the value would be, regardless of whether it's completion of a whole lateral or a partial of a lateral, and regardless of how much money would be given back to the property owner, I would look at it as a one and done in terms of one bite of the apple. If you're only going to get back $3,000, you don't have dibs on the other $7,000. You're one and done for this program. If you're going to agree to do one that's out in the field somewhere, whatever the cost was, it's done. And if somewhere else it breaks in that, you don't get to come back and get the difference between what was given to you and the $10,000. I guess I have a question for Robert. How difficult would it be to, and I'm just going to throw numbers without, but say from 1 day to 1 month, we were to pay back 70%, and from 1 month to 2 months, 60%, and 2 months to 3 months, 50%. You want to take a stab at what that number might be?
So if I understand your proposal, it would be the homeowner fronts the money, but then we pay it back in increments and.
Well, has not the homeowner already fronted the money?
In this case, yes.
Okay. I mean, ultimately, the total is, the financial burden will be the same, but it will be spread out for a longer period. The program itself, the full replacement that was approved last year in July, is already costing us close to $500,000 a year, right? $460,000 a year. All of this discussion is adding to what you've already approved. So I think we could administratively do it any way the committee and the board decides, Mr. Chairman, but understanding that it does become more difficult For example, if we're trying to track how much was given to a given property, what if the property sells the next year? Or what if it's 10 years later? Do we only do it for 10 years and then the clock starts again for another 10,000? There's a lot of difficulty in administrating all of our properties and keeping track of it, whether it be this proposal or whether it be paying it out over time. But the more complicated you make it, the more difficult it will be to administer. But whatever you decide, we can do it. It just becomes more difficult the more complex the arrangement is.
Okay. Well, I think, you know, in our discussions, we've always mentioned the property owner. So in Bob's scenarios where it's sold, property owner is no longer the property owner, and you're done. But I understand your concern with that. But you said it was like 300,000 for 6 months, give or take.
Yeah, it looks like about Scott had introduced this, but he said we looked at the permits that were issued during the 6-month period, 12 months back, 18 months and the like. And so we just wanted to bring to the committee, hey, what's the potential if everybody that had a permit issued were to come in and claim the 10 grand. And so in this case, going 6 months back during that period from July of 23, going back to January, it looks like there must have been 31 permits issued. So that's how we got the 310,000.
Well, under the assumption that every month it's the same number of permits, so from 0 to 1 and 1 to 2 and 2 to 3, those 3 months would be equal. And if you go by 70, 60, and 50% reimbursement, if you will, and assuming 10 grand, although we know many are not 10 grand, you're talking maybe $90,000 if that was all equal.
Oh, I see. I thought you were, I see. Your proposal is not pay the full amount, but pay only a portion of it. And then you're right. If it's 50%, it would be half these amounts. Or whatever.
If I just want to clarify though, and I apologize if I'm, maybe staff can help me here. These numbers that Bob provided was simply based on homes that have pulled a permit and had laterals replaced back this time frame. This home was built in 1980. So that permit was not issued by the MDC. Is that correct, Chris? No, Chris Levesque.
That's correct.
Yeah.
All I can say
So,
is-
yeah, Chris Stone. So the point is that, yes, so the point is there are multiple laterals that are not on here, that are not considered as part of these numbers that fall into this category.
Right.
So that's, you know, if the idea was to approve an ordinance that would benefit Mrs. Bryden's circumstances, that means you would expand this to include all laterals that were installed prior to MDC's approval. So that would be, you know, laterals built prior to 1946 in East Hartford, or 1982 in West Hartford. And so those are different numbers that we don't have. Though they don't represent these numbers. But
I don't understand.
yeah, so
If I build a house in 1940,
yep.
and I'm an MDC customer right now, right today, and my sewer line crashes, you're gonna come out and replace it for nothing.
What the ordinance says, and correct me if I'm wrong, what the ordinance says for the
Up to
10,000, up to 10,000 is if it's been permitted by the MDC, right? So if this lateral was built and not permitted by the MDC, we would have to modify this language to include,
Gotcha.
You know what I'm saying? It just didn't contemplate that. Not that the board wanted to contemplate that. It's just that these numbers were only generated from permits pulled from utility service, and here's what it would cost to go back. So there would be more circumstances like Mrs. Braden's that's not in these numbers. That's the only point.
Commissioner Payne?
Thank you, Commissioner Payne here. I was wondering if staff could tell us the specific reasons why, when this program was put together, that it was replacement of the full lateral. And I believe it had to do with the Clean Water Act and getting water out of the pipes. Is that correct? Or if you could expand on that?
Yes, well, I mean, a lot of things, right? So that, getting the stormwater out of the lateral, because we know that through all of our testing, that the first 6 feet of a lateral that's connected to the main is where most of the fracturing occurs, and that's where most of the water leaks in. So replacing the lateral in total is great for the homeowners, great for the MDC. And the lateral replacement is a practical. The majority of our laterals you could replace with $10,000, and obviously time escalates, and then that $10,000 it's not $10,000 anymore. But the issue of partial was there's a lot of partials, 2 feet, because initially prior to 2023, the homeowner was paying for it. So the homeowner was okay with replacing 2 feet of the lateral because they were paying for it. Now the ordinance says we pay up to $10,000. So that's it's better for the homeowners, and it's better for the MDC. I do think, forget about going backwards. Forget about. I think the partial language, to be fair to whatever the ordinance says. If you're willing to give a homeowner $10,000 to replace their lateral, and it's $9,750, you should be willing to give a homeowner the same amount because they had to replace 20 feet, 30 feet, or it was cross country. The question is, to the chairman's point, one and done. There's got to be a way to say whatever the ordinance says. Once we give you this money, the property has, this is the way we're instituting the new ordinance 2023, July of 2023. Once you receive the new lateral, you've gotten your new lateral, and the house has received the lateral. So whether you sell it or don't sell it, the new homeowner is not going to get a new lateral. The property has received a new lateral. But I think one of the issues here is whether or not you want to give everyone after January of 2023 up to $10,000 for partial, and then whether you want to go backwards as well.
If I could just follow up with another question.
Yes.
Thank you. So you don't, right now, you wouldn't recommend, I think it would be, moving forward, you'd want to make sure that the full laterals were replaced.
Yes, where the incentive for the $10,000 is to encourage the homeowner to replace the entire lateral, whether it costs $10,000 or $12,000 or $15,000. So we eliminate, this Achilles heel of the home as it's connected to our sewer system. And unfortunately, as you could imagine, some homeowners cannot afford to replace the entire length of that lateral. So there is a question of some fairness here, and I'm not going to pretend to have the language tonight, but it'd be something that we could look at and try and determine, and then the board committee decides, do we want to go back or not? We can go back and look, but we definitely are going to need to change this ordinance language about the permitting and who permitted it. I agree with the chairman that everybody that is a member of our organization after January 2023 is going to get a free lateral up to $10,000. Whether it was built by East Hartford or but in this specific case, going backwards, we would need to clarify that clearly.
Thank you.
Yes, Commissioner. Great.
For a question for Chris. Chris, any way or any best guess on how many of those laterals are out there that were not originally permitted by MDC? Like hundreds, thousands, 10,000? A lot.
Well, you can assume, let's say hypothetically, that all the homeowners in West Hartford that owned homes prior to 1984 were permitted to connect to the then sewage system in West Hartford. However many homes there are, that's tens of thousands of homes, I'm guessing, but it's an educated guess based upon the population of West Hartford now, and the growth since 1984, and what existed as of that date, and assuming that they all received a permit from the town of West Hartford. That's a big number. But I hope that answers your question, maybe as best as I can. But my understanding, Scott, correct me if I'm wrong, I thought that the permit issue related solely to whether or not the MDC permitted the repair, not whether the MDC permitted the initial hookup.
Yes, and I just want to clarify, all I'm simply saying is the numbers that we're representing tonight, here's what it would cost to go backwards, were generated by permits, right? So we're not suggesting that homeowners are not going to get free laterals under our program, but the exercise we did at BPW was how much would it cost if we went back from January of 2000, was it January 2023? So that's where these numbers came from, and we would have to go back and look at all the other laterals that are we don't have records of, that would be estimates, and that would increase this guesstimate, is all I'm saying. If we go backwards, is the point.
Commissioner Hoffman.
Yes, may I? Again, as not a member of the committee. And I don't want to take us off on a tangent, but I wonder, since some of the staff that would be apropos to answer part of the question. We have an SAP system, and I'm just wondering out loud, does that system, given what we have fed into the system, could that system model a situation regarding the sewer pipes in terms of average length, extraordinary situations, and so forth, so that we would have some data to hold on to? I mean, one of the reputations of the MDC has always been, we know exactly how much pipe there is and how many feet there is and how much you should pay and so forth. And I just sort of wonder out loud if that isn't something that might help the situation, maybe not tonight, but at some point down the road.
We can do that, Commissioner, and that's partly what we did in coming up with that $10,000 as a guesstimate. But there are going to be circumstances like this one, which is fair. It's a fair question. If you know, the neighbor is going to get $10,000 because their lateral is shorter, should not this lateral get $10,000 even though they're not replacing the whole thing? That's really the dilemma for the committee. And how far back do you go? And the farther you go back, the more that cost will be, and that's just a matter of money. It's really, the question is, how far do you go back?
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chris Levesque. Is it fair to assume that property owner who's replaced a sewer lateral, not by MDC, but privately, should have or would have been required to take out a permit with whatever town they're in?
So, if they're currently an MDC customer, so they're connected to our sewer system, our webpage says to contact our Utility Services Department Command Center, schedule an inspection for that repair or replacement. So going back prior to July 12th, 2023, prior to this, MDC inspector needed to be there because there is no town building department for a sanitary lateral, so a sanitary house connection. So that's not part of the plumbing building inspection department. So we act on behalf of the property owner to ensure that that lateral gets inspected. So that being said, property owners or their contractor don't call the MDC and go ahead and replace the lateral without us knowing sometimes. Can't have full oversight of everything. It's over 92,000 connections that we have to manage. So yeah, to answer your question, yes, they could do that without any inspection. In most of those cases, we wouldn't know unless we drove by and saw it, or the building department called us because maybe they made some changes inside the building to the actual plumbing. Did that answer?
I think so.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions? There seems to be a lot more questions that need to be on this topic, and clearly we haven't perfected the ordinance as well. So I do want to resolve this. Don't know if it's going to be tonight, to be quite honest. And having said that, I'm going to make a motion to table this without objection to the next meeting. Hopefully we can gather the information and make a decision that's best for all parties. No objection on the tabling? Great.
Mr.
Yes,
Chairman.
Commissioner Anderson.
I agree with the tabling, but with the tabling, will we kind of notify what will the major concerns be from what the chairman just said, as far as what's going to be addressed in that? One, the language to identify. Two, the length of time of going back and trying to encompass those, that whatever that cost factor is. So can we put what our charge is as we table, so we make sure that we kind of go right for that to address those issues?
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why I'm tabling it, because those are the questions that we have to answer.
Can we highlight that, make sure that gets done?
Sure.
Okay.
Absolutely, of course.
And Mr. Chair?
Yes.
When it does come back at another meeting, can we also have everything that's been put together in terms of numbers?
Absolutely, yes.
We're kind of working blind because we don't have the
Agreed.
numbers that were presented
Yep, we need to
from
have
the
all the
last
information
meeting.
presented before us, correct.
And, okay, thank you.
And if I may, we'll try to add some guesstimates on what we think are in terms of service connection repairs, partial repairs that might be out there in percentage-wise that would be included or need to additional monies for those as well, if that makes sense.
Makes a lot of sense. It's a major decision, and more information we can get, the better off we'll all be. Commissioner Anderson.
I'm sorry, I just want to add on to my little caveat. In the discussion, I wasn't too clear on the partial cost and the total cost and keeping track of that. Will there be some kind of mechanism, some kind of accounting system that will be put in place? I know there may be an extra burden on the staffing, whoever, maybe in accounts receivable, but how can we track that, right? And what is that concern? Because you mentioned that there was maybe an unburdened going forward, trying to keep track of who receives the 10,000, what that cost is. You're talking about somebody with a lower cost being submitted. How do we keep track of that? I was kind of cloudy on that piece. So if we can find a way to kind of say, okay, it's not going to cost 10,000, it's going to cost 3,000. They get to 3,000, they take one bite at the apple, that's done. So how do we kind of measure that?
And if I may, now, given 2023, right? So now we offer to provide up to $10,000.
Right.
So the old way we used to do it, which is a partial repair, there's no incentive from a homeowner to repair a portion, right? They're going to get up to 10,000. So if they got a break on 2 feet, it would make sense for that homeowner to use the 10,000 and replace as much pipe as they could, if it's clay or, and most likely it's clay pipe or cast iron. So they'll practically they would use all that 10,000. It's really when the pipe is much more expensive because it's 100 feet long, and then the question is, how do we write the language such that that person would get the 10,000 as well, just like somebody who had a shorter pipe. I think there's a way to do it. I think we just got to think about it, and the way we would like to do it is as simple as possible, right? The home, when we sell, well, we have about 400 closings a month, and the meter goes with the home. So once the house is sold, the closing, the homeowner, we escrow the money, we get paid. Whatever, this has been significant improvements over the years. So now we get our money, but the meter goes back into the name of the new owner. So the meter stays with the house. So say we do the same thing. That $10,000, whatever is expended to replace that lateral, will be documented in our SAPs. We call it CICO 0 system, and it would be identified that home received the $10,000. Now we're going to come back to you in the next couple of years and say 10,000 isn't 10,000 anymore, right? Are we going to escalate that or not? Right. But there's a way to keep track of it, Commissioner, to your point, and we'll make sure that we don't want to replace 5,000 and then 3,000. Oh, that'd just be a nightmare.
It's a nightmare.
Yeah.
Okay. Moving right along on item number 6, opportunity for general public comments. Yes.
Thank you. I just want to close. I appreciate the conversation this evening. I understand it's not an easy decision to make. I run a nonprofit. I understand how you have to consider a lot of things. But having said that, it's been a year and a half, and I hear last time there were numbers presented. Now this time, well, those aren't the numbers. There may be new numbers. So I appreciate people working on this. I hopefully when we come back, we'll have whatever the information is that people need to make a decision. I have followed the MDC process from the beginning, calling the emergency number, using an MDC-approved contractor, waiting for permitting, having someone inspected. Someone actually came out to my house about 5-6 months ago to remeasure, even though this has been a year and a half. So the process is a little long. I'm hopeful we'll get to the other point and some resolution. Thank you.
Thank you. Item number 7, Commissioner's request for future agenda items. Anyone? Okay, with no other business before us, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone.